Andrew with us today. This is a little bit of a tit for tat with China and the U.S. pertaining to suspensions and banning flights. The question is, how does it affect our U.S. airlines? Today, they're a bit higher, but I've heard from some people that it's not good news at all for a name like United Airlines, for example.
Well, it's not good news. The only thing is that, they're doing so little right now anyway, not flying there, that the incremental impact of this in the short to medium term is very low. They wish they were in a world where whether or not they could fly to China was their biggest issue right now. So not good. This, of course, ostensibly on COVID grounds that this is happening, but all part of the bigger spat between the U.S. and China. They just have bigger problems than this. For the global U.S. airlines. Chance here of an upside surprise for everybody, but it's going to be a longer slog for those names than it is for the airlines that are all domestic or nearly all domestic focused.
Yeah, and as you said, there's really not much going on now. But the TSA has reported for weeks now that each week they're seeing more people than the week before.
Absolutely.
So tell me more about how that could help the group. I mean, who do you see as a real winner in this?
Yeah, and you're right. And the increases are stark. I mean, it's not just marginal. We're talking, this past Monday, 350,000 people went through TSA security checkpoints. Okay, so what's the context there? Well, that compares to a low of like 87,000 in mid-April. Now, it also compares to 2.5 million on the same day last year. So we're still closer to the lows than the highs, but the trajectory has been clearly positive. And basically, this is nearly all domestic travel. And especially the airlines with more heartland exposure than coastal exposure are probably poised to benefit here. So talking about names like Southwest Airlines, a nearly all domestic airline that, yeah, it serves the big cities, but focuses more on the center of the country where the COVID crisis hasn't been as bad. Allegiant, an all domestic airline that focuses on heartland markets. Those are the ones that might see the quickest rebounds. But all airlines here that have said anything have generally said good things about May, at least compared to April, not compared to most of their history. Alaska Airlines, for example, running 40% load factors, in other words, occupancy rate, essentially. Of course, that was on a nearly 80% capacity cut. They're still flying a lot less, but they were doing that in April, too, and 40% compares to just 15% in April.
Okay, so you talked about the recovery and when everything reopens. You talked about which ones would be doing well. Southwest is one that always seems to grab people's attention. They think it's a short U.S. domestic-based type of airline, and that one is likely to recover maybe a little faster than some of those big guys that fly internationally. Do you think that's a fair summation?
Right, and of course that could all be priced in from an equity standpoint already. But yes, right. When you look at who's poised here to rebound, you kind of have to look at two things. First of all, what kind of shape were they in going into the crisis, and then what is their network exposure? And Southwest is kind of the one that ticks both of those boxes. An airline that had a strong balance sheet before all of this, better poised than some to withstand the crisis, and then one that tends to serve markets that'll rebound more quickly. So you compare that, let's say, to an airline like Delta, with a very good balance sheet, went into this in as good a shape as anybody, but with more of a global network. Of those big three
right.
U.S. airlines, United and American went into this in the worst shape, has the worst balance sheet. But on the other hand, it is somewhat more domestic focused than United and Delta. So at least it has that going for it, better kinds of Latin America exposure, which right now, that was one pocket of the world that hadn't been as badly affected at the beginning of this crisis, but now it's as badly affected as anybody if you look at what's happening in Brazil and elsewhere.
What are your thoughts on Boeing these days? I mean, we heard about Third Point having an interest in Boeing. What are your thoughts on this great American company?
Yeah, a great but battered American company, right? And it's just a question here of, everybody knows that the expectations obviously are very low. So, is there an upside surprise to come now with all of this pessimism baked in? Boeing, I mean, look, it was one of the few companies on the planet that probably could have withstood not just one giant crisis, the one we're going through now, but of course, the previous one, which it's still in the middle of. The MAX crisis is very much ongoing, and it's worse now because of this. because now so much time has passed and airlines have so much less desire for new airplanes that they're in a position to renegotiate the pricing on those thousands of Maxes that are still on Boeing's order books. Not to mention those that have been canceled lately. But everybody knows all that. So it's just a question of if you think here that these green shoots for the airlines themselves will eventually lead to positive news for Boeing and other airframe manufacturers, then obviously again so much bad baked in here that there could be some opportunity.
Seth, I got to go. I only have, 10 seconds left. But what do you think is our takeaway? I go to the water cooler and say, I think the airlines can regain 30-40% by Christmas. Or do you have some sort of gauge of what could happen that might be fair?
Right. So I don't actually make equity ratings, but, there's this expectation out there that it could be 2023 before things are back to 2019 levels. I think we're going to see some airlines, again, particularly those more domestic focused ones, where for U.S. airlines anywhere, where 2021 isn't a great year, but it's not as bad of a year as some people expect.